Memphis, February 1971, 4:36 a.m. A tremor in the guard's voice crackles through the early morning hush. "Sir, there's a basket at Gate 1. Under the haze of dawn lamps, Elvis Prescott steps into his robe and crosses the gravel drive. There, in a woven cradle, lies an infant wrapped in a moth-worn blanket scented of milk, and beside him a single envelope scrawled in a woman's hand. I can't raise him, but you will. No witness. No cameras. In that breathless moment, the king's crown shifts weight, and the silence that follows will echo for a lifetime. Elvis slipped out of his bedroom in the hush before dawn, each footstep nearly silent on the thick carpet of Graceland's upstairs hallway. The house felt vast and empty at 4:36 a.m., its stillness heavy against his skin. He had lain awake for hours, 3 hours' sleep at best, mind spinning with the aftershocks of the Vegas shows, the roar of the crowd still ringing in his ears. Here, in these corridors lined with family portraits and silent trophies, reality pressed in with a weight he could not shake. He paused at a window overlooking the front gates. The world beyond was black and windless, save for the distant click of a security guard's boots on the gravel drive. The night air held a chill that seeped through the glass, stirring a coil of unease in his chest. He was about to return to bed when a rapid flash of movement drew his gaze down to the guardhouse light. Inside the little booth, the guard, Thomas, a lanky fellow with hollow cheeks, fumbled the receiver. His voice came clipped and shaky through the wall speaker. "Mr. Presley, there's a basket at Gate 1. Elvis's heart constricted. He strode downstairs 2 steps at a time and crossed the marble hallway to the front entrance. Outside, the crisp February air burned at his lungs. The driveway lights cast sharp cones of yellow against the stepping stones. There, just beyond the iron gates, lay a wicker basket, its woven sides gleaming in the lamplight. Inside, swaddled in an old patchwork blanket redolent of milk and mothballs, was a newborn, his pale, downy head turned in sleep. One tiny fist poked free against the coarse wool. Elvis knelt, heart hammering, and unwrapped the blanket's edge. The baby stirred, eyes flickering open in a half-dream. Beneath the basket's rim, a small envelope lay on the ground. He snapped it open, holding the child with one arm and peeling back the flap with the other. Inside was a black-and-white photograph clipped from some long-forgotten newspaper. A teenage Elvis, lank and shy, waltzing with a young woman in a white sweater beneath a banner that read, "King and Queen of the Tupelo 1953 Prom." Her smile was luminous, her eyes bright with hope. No signature, but the cursive on the back, slanted and elegant, felt familiar in his bones. "Linda Craven," he whispered to himself, the name tasting bittersweet. He looked down at the infant whose fingers curled around his thumb. The baby's soft breath warmed his palm, and for a moment the ache of his own loneliness cracked open. A father's instinct flickered to life. Thomas appeared at his elbow, unease written in his posture. "Sir, what do you want me to do?" he asked. Elvis rose, baby cradled against his chest. His voice was firm, low. "No one touches him. Not until I find out where he belongs." His words echoed in the cold air like a vow. The guard swallowed. "Yes, sir." Elvis stepped back through the gate and into the house, heading straight for the servants' quarters. The night watchman, the butler, the nurse, each appeared at his summons, drawn by the unusual tension rippling through the normally quiet estate. "Find a room for him," Elvis instructed the nurse gently, lifting the child with practiced care. "Somewhere warm. I'll tell you more in a moment." He laid the blanket-wrapped infant on a cot near the nursery door. The nurse nodded, eyes wide with deference and uncertainty. He stepped into the grand hallway, photograph still in hand. The staff formed a loose line, brows knit with questions they dared not voice. He strode past them without a glance, following the echo of his boots to the library's fireplace hearth, where chairs were set for late-night reading. He sank into one, the photograph laid on his knee, and stared down at his younger self and Linda, backlit by the trophy case behind him. In the flicker of the hearth's dying embers, his own eyes looked unfamiliar, too old, too worn by expectation. He thought of the baby upstairs, so new to the world and already abandoned. His chest constricted with a fierce protectiveness. He folded the photograph carefully, as if tucking away a promise. "Sir?" The butler's voice broke the hush. "Shall I fetch you anything?" Elvis shook his head, gaze still on Linda's smiling face. "Not yet," he said. "Not yet." He rose and drifted through the library's tall windows to the terrace, paper in hand, and stared into the dawning sky. The first pale violet streaks of dawn shimmered on the horizon. He pressed the photograph to his heart. For the first time in years, more than the roar of an adoring crowd, more than the weight of his fame, mattered this small life sleeping in an upstairs room, an unknown child entrusted to him in the night. "Until we know," he murmured to the empty dawn. "You're mine." And with that, he turned back inside, footsteps slow but resolute, the night's quiet punctuated only by the rising wind and the soft echo of a new responsibility. He awoke to the midday sun slanting through the gauzy curtains of Graceland's guest suite, the wicker cradle empty and silent near the window. Elvis sat on the edge of the bed, the weight of the infant's blanket, now folded neatly at the foot, pressing against his chest. He ran his fingers through his hair and stood, making his way through the empty halls to the office where Colonel Parker held court over contracts and schedules. "Colonel," Elvis said, closing the door behind him. The colonel glanced up from a stack of booking sheets. "I need to find Linda Craven. Don't involve the press or the police. I'll handle it myself." The colonel's eyes narrowed behind his spectacles. "Linda Craven? The prom queen from Tupelo? You haven't seen her in over 20 years. Elvis, we don't even know if she's alive." The colonel spoke frankly. "We can't just send people out to hunt ghosts." Elvis's jaw set like steel. "I'll go myself." He extracted a crumpled telegram from his pocket. "She was spotted in Lebanon, Tennessee. I leave tonight." That evening, his Cadillac Fleetwood brougham slipped away from Graceland under a crescent moon. No flashing lights, no waiting photographers, only the quiet hum of the V8 engine and the hum of tires on the highway. He carried only a lightweight bag, the greens and browns of his travel clothes blending into the night, and the black and white photograph tucked into his shirt pocket. By midnight, he pulled into the parking lot of Charlie's Diner on the outskirts of Lebanon. The neon sign flickered in the downpour. Open 24 hours. Inside, a few late-shift truckers slumped over Formica tables, steaming cups of coffee at hand. The aroma of fried potatoes and bacon clung to the air. A waitress in an embroidered uniform, her hair wrapped in a kerchief, approached him. "What'll it be?" she asked, voice low with fatigue. "Coffee," Elvis replied. "Strong." He slid into a booth under a rain-spattered window, the world outside blurred by the shower. She set the mug before him without pressing for a name, nodding politely and moving on to the next table. Elvis rested his elbows on the Formica, the photograph in his pocket burning against his chest. He sipped the coffee, bitter, life-giving, and watched the front door. Each time it opened, He half expected to see Linda's familiar silhouette. He remembered her laugh, bright and untamed, and the way she'd steadied his nerves in the glare of prom photographs. But over the years, she'd vanished from billboards and magazine pages, her face swallowed by rumor and time. At nearly 1 a.m., the bell jingled again, admitting a slender figure in a wool coat and a knitted cap pulled low. She moved with difficulty, her legs unable to carry her weight fully. Elvis froze, heart lurching. A wheelchair rolled behind her, pushed by a stooped attendant. The woman's coat sleeve slid back, revealing a thin wrist and the faded scar of an old injury. He rose, chair scraping across the floor. The waitress looked up, mid-pour. Elvis smiled, a gentle curve of lips that carried both relief and sorrow. The woman paused beside the booth, gaze drifting across the empty tables, then settling on him. Linda's eyes caught the overhead light for a moment, once sparkling with mischief, now shadowed by hardship. "Mr." Her voice cracked, uncertain. "Elvis?" he offered softly, extending a hand. "Linda?" Recognition flickered, then her breath hitched. "Elvis Presley," she whispered, half to herself. The attendant stopped behind her, smoothing the wheels of the chair to a halt. Linda touched the photograph he held up, crumpled but intact. He laid it on the table, face up, so she could see the two of them dancing under tassel banners in 1953. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't think you'd ever come." She turned her face away, trading pride for vulnerability. I couldn't. I just couldn't ask for help." Her voice trembled with memories she'd long tried to bury. He sat opposite her, leaving the photograph between them. "I needed to know why you left the baby here." She swallowed, tracing the rim of her mug. "I was afraid," she confessed. "Afraid I'd lose him. Afraid I'd lose you again if I stayed." Her hand trembled on the mug's handle. "I didn't want strangers raising him. I thought you'd come back for him, and I couldn't face that if you didn't." Elvis's chest tightened with a blend of anger and compassion. He reached across and laid his hand over hers, careful not to crush her fragile bones. "He's safe," he said, voice steady, "and I'm not going anywhere." She drew in a shuddering breath, eyes glistening in the diner's fluorescence. Outside, the rain whispered on asphalt, each drop a tiny confession. Linda turned her wheelchair slightly, leaning closer. "I believed you were gone," she whispered. He nodded, remembering his own flight from fear decades ago. "I was lost," he admitted. "I thought fame would fill the emptiness inside me, but I was wrong." He paused, voice softening. "I'm here, now." They sat together in the hush between late-night coffee refills, two souls reunited by fear and hope. The diner's lights glimmered against the rain-washed windows, and for the first time in years, Elvis felt something steadier than applause. A quiet promise returned. Elvis eased his Cadillac Fleetwood brougham through the iron gates of Graceland for the second time that morning, the early spring sun painting long shadows across the Magnolia Drive. In the back seat, secured in a small car seat plush with blankets, slept the infant who had appeared on his doorstep, a child he would now care for. Lisa Marie watched from the passenger side window, her blue eyes wide with curiosity, as she greeted her new little brother with a gentle wave. Behind them, the household staff moved swiftly. The nurse had prepared a spare bedroom next to Lisa Marie's, painting its walls a soft buttercup yellow, and stocking it with tiny clothes, a rocking chair, and the old cradle that had once held Lisa Marie herself. Elvis carried the infant inside, cradling him as one would a fragile ornament, and placed him in the center of the pastel-trimmed nursery floor. He knelt to smooth the edges of the blanket, admiration and protectiveness flickering in his gaze. "No one else touches him," Elvis said quietly, not addressing the staff directly, but issuing a decree that rippled through the household. The nurse nodded. Even the butler, who paused his afternoon tea delivery, understood without words. For 3 days, Elvis's schedule unraveled. Rehearsals were postponed, calls to Vegas went unanswered, and the estate settled into an unusual hush. Elvis took turns holding the baby, learning the little one's quiet rhythms, fluttering eyelids, fleeting coos, the way his tiny hand gripped a finger as if anchoring himself in this new world. Lisa Marie attempted to sing him a lullaby, but dissolved into giggles when the infant yawned and stretched like a budding wildflower. On the 4th night, as moonlight silvered the cradled blanket, the baby's soft breathing became ragged. Elvis felt the thrum of frantic energy in his chest as the nurse rushed in, her face pale beneath the lamplight. She checked the infant's pulse, her brow furrowing. "Sir," she said, voice steady but urgent, "he's running a high fever, and I'm detecting a murmur. It could be congenital, something structural. He needs a specialist. Now." Elvis did not hesitate. He swept the baby into his arms, wrapped in the familiar patches of blanket that still carried the scent of the roadside. He met the nurse's eyes. "We go now." In under 10 minutes, the Cadillac roared out of the gates with Elvis driving. White shirt sleeves rolled, tie discarded, leaving behind the grandeur of Graceland for the stark fluorescence of Baptist Memorial Hospital on the edge of Memphis. The night air stung their faces as they sped through empty streets. Elvis's jaw clenched in determined lines, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Inside the hospital's emergency entrance, the sliding doors whooshed open to a cacophony of wheeled stretchers, antiseptic scent, and hushed alarms. Elvis strode past the triage nurse, calling out his patient's name and symptoms. A team fell in behind him. Nurse, orderly, security guard. Yet he directed them with quiet authority. They entered a curtained bay where a young pediatric cardiologist waited, his white coat crisp under the harsh overhead lights. He examined the baby's chest, listened with a stethoscope, and peered at the baby's eyes, which flickered open at the intrusion of bright lamps. "Mr. Presley?" the doctor said, tilting his head. Are you this young man's father?" Elvis nodded, voice low. "He's under my care." The cardiologist's brow knit as he studied the baby's wristband. I thought I recognized this patient. We treated him a month ago for dehydration and a viral infection. But I noted a faint murmur even then. Have you noticed any other symptoms? Blue lips during feeding? Fatigue?" Elvis swallowed. "He's been irritable, slept poorly. But we thought it was just a cold." The doctor's expression softened. "Those signs can point to an atrial septal defect or similar congenital issue. We need an echocardiogram immediately. Non-invasive, but crucial. He'll need monitoring in the pediatric ICU." Elvis's face remained composed, though a storm whipped behind his eyes. "Whatever he needs," he said. "Make it happen." The staff buzzed into action. Bed rails lowered, monitors brought in. The baby swaddled and wheeled away with Elvis trailing, white coat flaring behind him. He followed into the dim corridors where the fluorescent panels hummed and the linoleum gleamed under the sterile glow. He kept his steps measured, heart pounding behind the professional calm. In the echoing hallway, the cardiologist caught up to him. "Mr. Presley, I'm sorry. If this is sudden, we'll do everything we can." Elvis stopped, shoulders squared. "I'm here. Whatever he needs." The doctor hesitated, lowered his voice. This isn't his first admission. There were signs of neglect before, malnutrition, bruises in places I wouldn't expect. Someone brought him in, said they found him wandering a dark driveway. We filed a report, but no follow-through. A cold twist seized Elvis's gut. So someone abandoned him at my gates, he said bitterly, and he ended up here again. He bowed his head. He won't leave this hospital alone. The cardiologist placed a hand on Elvis's shoulder. He's lucky you're in his life now. Elvis nodded, flinching at the thought of the baby's small body carrying scars of neglect. He will be safe. He rested a hand on the bay's swinging door as it closed behind the nurse's cart. Come hell or high water. Behind those doors, machines beeped in a lullaby of care. Elvis stood guard in scrubs borrowed for the night, the weight of a father's promise heavier than any crown he'd worn. And in the hush of the hospital ward, fluorescent lights humming, monitors pulsing, the baby's steady breath, he resolved that this child, lost once, would never be lost again. Elvis sat behind his desk in the Graceland study, the lamplight flickering against mahogany shelves lined with records and fan mail. Before him lay a neat stack of legal papers, each stamped and initialed by his attorney. Petitions for emergency guardianship, affidavits swearing his fitness to care for the child, and a clause granting him sole custody pending a full court hearing. His pen hovered above the last signature line, one final stroke to transform a promise into a document recognized by law. He paused, closing his eyes against the burden of the moment. Years of contracts, royalties, and stage obligations had never felt so hollow. This wasn't about image or legacy. It was about a small life he had sworn to protect. He signed his name with deliberate care, recalling the infant's tiny fingers curled around his thumb, the way the child's eyes had opened in those early moments at the gate. Outside, the hush of the mansion seemed deliberate, as if Graceland itself held its breath. Within hours, the paperwork was filed in Shelby County Court, stamped accepted with a mild flourish of judicial ink. Elvis received notice that a hearing would be scheduled, and until then, he stood as the child's official guardian. It was a victory wrought in signatures and statutes, yet the real triumph would be measured in days of feeding, midnight feedings, first laughs, and scraped knees. It took less than 24 hours for the tabloids to catch wind. Headlines blared, "King of Rock and Roll adopts foundling," and "Elvis turns father." The talking heads speculated wildly. Paparazzi camped outside courthouse steps, helicopter blades churning overhead, and street kiosks hawked magazines with sensational cover blurbs. Colonel Parker exploded in his office, pacing in circles. "You're ruining your brand," he shouted over the phone. "The world wants glamour, not diapers and custody battles." Elvis closed his eyes, a deep calm emanating from his core. "This isn't about brand," he replied evenly. "It's about being a man." The colonel sputtered, but Elvis ended the call without rancor. He walked to the nursery where the child slept in a gentle swirl of blankets. He lowered himself to the rocking chair, lifting the babe into his arms. The house's quiet seemed to cradle them both in a world where press drones and gossip could not intrude. In that soft glow, his heart swelled with a father's fierce devotion. 2 weeks later, the silver chassis of the tour bus gleamed beneath the neon of Las Vegas. Elvis had flown the child and a discreet nanny in first class, then joined them after the evening's show. Now, after one of his most electrifying sets, he prepared for an unadvertised finale, a gesture unscripted, unheard by publicists, felt only in the hush of those present. On stage, the orchestra plunged into the final notes of American Trilogy. Fans rose to their feet, clapping and cheering as the spotlight found him. He strode to center stage, indigo suit jacket catching the light, and paused by a single stool and microphone stand. The crowd's din faded as anticipation rippled through the seats. He lifted the mic and spoke in a tone so low that the house lights dimmed in respect. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady but heavy with sincerity. "Tonight, I didn't come to sell records or to dazzle you with spectacle. I came because I learned something essential. Sometimes, to leave something behind that lasts, you must first be willing to simply be human." A hush deeper than any ballad fell. Somewhere in the mezzanine, a child's soft cry punctuated the silence, a sound Elvis recognized from his own nights at home. He set the mic aside and walked to the edge of the stage, peering into the sea of faces. There, tucked near the back, sat two figures, a woman in a slouched fedora and, on her lap, the small child wrapped in a blanket. Their eyes met, and Elvis offered a slight nod. He returned to the mic and began 3 songs no one had ever recorded live. The first was a stripped-down country ballad, voice catching on the lines, "I found a piece of my soul in the eyes of a child." The second was a gospel-tinged hymn of hope, piano chords echoing like church bells. The third was a reimagined classic, "Love Me Tender," but with new words, a vow to protect innocence, to honor the trust placed in him. Each lyric fell gently, carrying the weight of true confession. As the last note faded, the audience remained motionless, processing what they had witnessed. No frenzy of applause erupted. Instead, a collective, reverent stillness held the theater in a moment outside time. Then, one by one, hands lifted in quiet ovation, soft claps that radiated through the hall like echoes of a heartbeat. Elvis bowed his head, tears glinting in his eyes. He felt the child's small breath against his heart, heard Linda's years-old plea carried to fruition. Backstage, the child slept again, safe in Linda's arms. Elvis placed a gentle hand on the woman's shoulder. "Thank you," he whispered, not for gratitude's sake, but in recognition of a journey begun with a basket at dawn's gate and culminating in this silent vow before thousands. He walked into the empty auditorium before the crowd spilled into the hallway, standing alone amid the vacant seats. Amber exit signs cast long rectangles of light across plush carpet. He closed his eyes, inhaling the residual warmth of the night. In that hush after the storm of lights and applause, Elvis Presley felt more alive than ever. Not as a king of rock, but as a man who had learned that the truest legacy was the human one he carried in his arms.